Welcome back, deep divers. Ready to unearth some truly unexpected legacies.
Always up for a historical treasure hunt. What skeletons are we unearthing today?
Today, we're diving deep into the Black Death. But, and here's the twist, we're not just talking about the millions who perish.
Going beyond the body count. I like it. So what's on the autopsy table today?
We're looking at the surprising ways this pandemic reshaped the world as we know it. Yeah, buckle up, because the Black Death's reach goes way beyond just a death toll.
It's like those historical domino effects, right? One event triggers an avalanche of unforeseen consequences.
Exactly. Let's start with the most obvious, the workforce. Imagine Europe in the 1340s. You're a peasant, life's already a hard bargain.
Back then, you were basically tied to the land, working for a lord who, let's be honest, called most of the shots. Not much wiggle room.
Then, bam! The Black Death arrives, and everything changes. Suddenly, those who survived, they find themselves holding a very different hand.
It's like the Grim Reaper played equalizer. Think about it. When upwards of 60% of some regions are wiped out, labor becomes a precious commodity.
Supply and demand, even in the face of a pandemic.
Precisely. And we see the evidence. Wages for skilled laborers, those carpenters and masons, their pay nearly doubled. Talk about leverage.
So, the peasants now had more bargaining power. I admit that didn't sit well with those in charge.
You're catching on. Take England, for example. They tried to slam the brakes on this whole economic shift with the Statute of Laborers in 1351.
The statute of what now?
Basically, their attempt to hit the undo button on workers' newfound freedom. The goal, freeze wages right back to pre-plague levels.
What? Talk about trying to hold back the tide. Did it work?
Not a chance. People basically just shrugged and went on with their lives. Imagine that. A law designed to dictate your livelihood just ignored.
That speaks volumes about the shifting power dynamics of the time. But this newfound defiance, it wasn't just about wages, was it?
You're right. This simmering tension boils over, quite literally, with peasant revolts. Remember the English peasant revolt of 1381?
Absolutely. A pivotal moment, though ultimately unsuccessful. Those farmers meant business.
They were demanding change, more social mobility, less oppression. The Black Death had unearthed a deep well of resentment.
It wasn't just about economics, though. Women, who had traditionally been confined to specific roles, suddenly found themselves with possibilities.
Oh, absolutely. With a shortage of men, women stepped up, filling roles traditionally seen as men's work. We see them as artisans, merchants, even brewers.
It's amazing to picture them taking on these roles. Was there any official recognition of this shift?
Believe it or not, we even see women joining guilds, those professional organizations that used to be exclusively male.
That's a huge step. So, less workers, higher pay, social unrest, and women breaking barriers. It's like the Black Death hit the reset button on society.
And here's where those dominoes really start to fall. With fewer hands to work the fields, vast stretches of land went untended.
So what happened? Did they just abandon the land?
Not quite. This is where sheep come in. A lot less labor-intensive than crops. Plus, wool was in high demand.
Sheep, the unexpected heroes of the Black Death. Who knew?
It's all connected. This shift to sheep herding snowballed into what we call the enclosure movement. Land, once accessible to all, fenced off for private use.
So, a single pandemic ends up changing the very fabric of land ownership. It really makes you appreciate those historical ripple effects, doesn't it? It's like a chain reaction through history, isn't it? But the Black Death's impact, it wasn't just about economics and social structures, was it? It really shook things up on a whole other level.
It's true. The Black Death had a way of worming its way into every aspect of life, even art and culture. It's hard to imagine anything that wouldn't be touched by that level of mortality.
Exactly. You can't talk about the Black Death without addressing its impact on how people grappled with their own mortality. Like, how do you process that much death around you?
Well, one way is through art, and we see this really vividly in the art of the time. It's almost like this morbid fascination with death just takes over.
Oh, for sure. And the Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, has to be one of the most striking examples of that. Talk about imagery that stays with you.
Oh, absolutely. You've got these skeletons personified as death, and they're just leading people from all walks of life in this big macabre dance. There's no escape.
No escape. It's like this stark reminder that, hey, rich or poor, young or old, we're all headed to the same place eventually. Pretty sobering stuff.
Definitely. But it wasn't just about being morbid. There was a deeper purpose there. I mean, why else incorporate something like that into your art?
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It was like their way of processing this ever-present threat of death, trying to make sense of it all. And that idea, that memento mori, remember that you will die, it didn't just disappear with the Black Death, did it?
Not at all. We see it popping up throughout history, influencing later art movements like the Renaissance and the Baroque period.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's like this morbid fascination with death just became ingrained in our collective consciousness. But, and maybe this is just me, amidst all this death and despair, it seems like the Black Death also sparked something else.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are you thinking?
Well, it was like humanity kind of took a step back and said, okay, we need some answers here.
Oh, I absolutely see what you mean. This wasn't just a time of mourning, it was a time of questioning, too. Think about it. The church, which had so much sway back then, it always had an explanation for hardship, right? God's will, divine punishment. But with the Black Death, those explanations, they didn't quite cut it anymore.
Because how do you reconcile so much suffering, so much indiscriminate death with a benevolent God? Tough question. And it's a question that's persisted throughout history, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And in a way, you could say that questioning led to a search for new answers. We see it in the rise of universities, a thirst for knowledge beyond just religious doctrine.
A thirst for knowledge that could provide real, practical solutions.
Precisely. And that's reflected in the curriculum, too. Suddenly, fields like medicine, law, natural sciences, they're all experiencing this surge in popularity.
It's like they were trying to equip themselves to understand and maybe even control the world around them. Fascinating stuff. Speaking of mysteries, let's talk about the origins of the Black Death itself. We touched on those cemeteries near Lake Issyk-Kul in Kyrgyzstan.
Right, the ones with those inscriptions mentioning pestilence. They've always been a bit of a puzzle.
A puzzle that's revealing more and more with time, actually. What if I told you that recent research on those cemeteries has turned up something completely unexpected? Something that could rewrite what we thought we knew about the Black Death's timeline. It's like stepping back in time, isn't it? These ancient burial grounds holding clues to a pandemic that shook the world. Talk about a history lesson with a side of goosebumps.
It really makes you appreciate how far science has come. I mean, we can extract DNA from centuries-old remains and get a glimpse into the past. That's incredible.
It's like having a conversation with history itself. So, what secrets did these ancient genes reveal?
Well, remember we talked about Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the Black Death? Well, they found it in those cemeteries dating back to the early 1300s.
Wait, so decades before the Black Death ravaged Europe? That changes things, doesn't it?
It really does. It throws a wrench into the old timeline. Now, the plague might have been quietly making its way through Central Asia long before it ever reached European shores.
So how did it make the leap from Central Asia to Europe? Any theories?
Well, the cemetery's location offers a pretty compelling clue. Remember how we talked about those cemeteries being near the Silk Road? Those ancient trade routes?
Right, that network of paths that basically connected the world back then.
Yeah.
It's almost too perfect, isn't it? Like a highway for disease.
It's like a giant game of connect the dots. The Silk Road, with all its merchants and travelers, it would have been the perfect breeding ground for a pandemic, all those people coming and going. It's no wonder the Black Death spread like wildfire.
It really puts into perspective just how small the world really is. Events happening continents away can have ripple effects that we might not even see coming. And that's what's so fascinating about history, isn't it? It's not just dates and names in a textbook. It's about understanding those connections, those echoes of the past that still resonate today.
Absolutely. The Black Death, it's a stark reminder of how interconnected we are, and more importantly, how vulnerable we are to those unforeseen events, those historical curveballs that life throws our way. So while we may have uncovered some intriguing clues about the Black Death today, it also leaves us with more questions. It makes you wonder what other mysteries are still out there waiting to be unearthed.
It's a good reminder that history is never truly finished, is it? There's always something new to discover, and who knows what those discoveries might reveal about ourselves and the world we live in. So to our listeners, we leave you with this. Keep asking questions. Keep exploring. Keep digging deeper into the past, because you never know what you might uncover. And who knows, maybe one day, you'll be the one making those groundbreaking discoveries, rewriting history, one unearthing at a time. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time.